Hello everybody, so today's video is going to be about something a little bit different than I normally cover, and that's blue crabs. I caught these guys. I got about, I think, 20 to 24 of these. I put in some crab pots yesterday here in the Chickahominy River in Virginia. It's a tidal river, and I use catfish for bait, and I caught these guys, got them in this morning. And I wanted to make a video to talk about how I clean and cook crabs, because not everybody cleans their crabs before cooking, but I think it's a great way to do it. It has a lot of benefits. And so I want to get into that today. Really, step one in this process, which we're doing right now, is to ice down the crabs. And that is more humane for the crabs. It's certainly more humane for me because they're not going to pinch me. And this will kind of put them into kind of a dormant state and take the fight out of them before we clean them. So I'm going to let them sit in this ice for about another 5 or 10 minutes, and then I'll set up the camera and start cleaning some crabs and show you how it goes. Okay, so the crabs are iced down, and I'm ready to start cleaning them. And it's kind of a, I don't know, 3-bucket process. I've got my ice crabs here. I've got a waste bucket over here. I've got a bucket with a little bit of ice for the part of the crab we're keeping to cook. And there's a bunch of different ways to do this. I mean, I'm not going to tell you there's a best way, but the gist of it is you want to get the top shell off and clean out the guts and the eyeballs and the skirt and everything else, so that you're left basically with the bottom of the crab and the claws, which is where all the meat is. And when I get into cooking these later, I'll talk about some of the benefits of that. But so I'm going to grab these guys here, and like I said, there's a couple ways to do it. I like to start by hand and just tear the top shell off, and then I normally use an oyster knife and tear the eyeballs off, and use an oyster knife and scrape out the lung or the dead man, which you don't want to mess with, and then scrape out some of the guts in the middle. And then the last part here is I tear off the skirt, and that's basically a cleaned crab. And a lot of people will stop here. I like to go one little step further and take the hose and just kind of rinse out any loose stuff that's remaining, and that's our cleaned crab, and that guy is ready to be seasoned and cooked. And so I'm going to go through and mow through this bucket. I think I got about 20 or 24 in here. I lost count when I was pulling them in. And when I get all of them ready, we'll move on to the next step, which is going to be seasoning and cooking these guys. Okay, so I've got all the crabs clean. They're over here in the bucket. I've got my pot going to get the steam on. And what I'm going to do now is start laying the crabs in layers in this steamer basket. And I wanted to shoot the video right at this first step because you can now see the advantage to cleaning the crabs. When you sprinkle your spice in there, it's getting right into the crab, right onto the meat. And I think that's one of the main benefits of this method. There's some others that I'm going to talk about when I get to picking these crabs, but really one of the things I like most about cleaning the crabs ahead of time is that you're able to get the seasoning right into the meat. And for seasoning, what I use is basically a 50-50 mix of Old Bay and kosher salt, and that's always worked great for me. Different people have different preferences, but that's my favorite. So I'm going to continue pulling these guys out of the bucket, laying them in the pot, then sprinkling some season on them. And in a few more minutes, we'll put them on the steam. Okay, so we're about ready to cook now. So I counted right this time, and I got 25 crabs in there. and everything's nice and seasoned and layered. And so I'm gonna put the camera down and we'll get these guys into the pot, and they're gonna cook. Usually I cook this size batch about 20 minutes. So we'll come back 20 minutes when these guys are done and take a look. All right, so it's been 20 minutes. I just turned off the gas and we're gonna see what we got here. That looks good. So I'll let these guys cool off a bit. Now, if we were gonna sit down and just pick at these and eat them, I would just spread them out on some newspaper on a table, let them cool off, and then people could come have at them. But these guys are gonna go into some crab cakes. So what I normally like to do is let them cool off a little bit out here, and then I'm gonna stick them in some big Tupperware containers and put them in the fridge, and come back in 4 or 5 hours when I have some more time and sit down and pick them. When you let them cool off like that in the fridge, the meat's actually easier to pick out, and of course the crabs are easier to handle because they're not hot. And I can actually sit down at my kitchen table and do that, which is a nice easy way to pick through some crabs and really get a good yield of meat for the crab cake. So I'll let these guys cool off and come back and finish up the video this evening and show you how I pick these for the meat. Okay, so I'm fixing to pick the cooked crabs now, and this gets me to the second reason I think it's better to clean the crabs before you cook them, and that is when it comes time to do the picking, it's just way neater, it's way cleaner. You can be more strategic and more surgical about getting to the crab meat, and it doesn't make nearly as big of a mess as if you're doing the shelling and cleaning and then the picking all at the table. And so to me, this is probably, in terms of ease of use, this is where it really pays off to do the cleaning ahead of time outside, you know, with the buckets and the hose, and where you can make a mess, because now things are much easier as we go to pick these crabs. And so I'm going to pick these guys to make some crab cakes. And years ago I watched a bunch of little old ladies that worked at a crab processing shop down in Pocosin, Virginia, and they were fast and they knew what they were doing. They got the meat out real easily. Sometimes when I'm working on a crab, it just all comes together and you get all the meat out easily. Other times it's like you got to really pick at it. And so I think every crab's a little bit different, but I'm going to kind of go through the process that I use. First, I generally break it in half, and then really the bulk of the meat is going to be back here. That's the back fin meat, and that's a nice big chunk of meat, big lump, and you want to try and get that out in one piece if you can, and there you go. That's just a really nice piece of crab meat. When I make crab cakes, I try and leave the chunks really big like this, and that's what you want to do. And so I usually start there at the back fin, and then there's usually another flake of it or two that you can get out. And that's pretty much it for the back fin. And then there's going to be meat in these little cells at each leg that you can pick out, and these are smaller pieces. But when you're doing crab cakes, you know, the small pieces really add up. And so you can come in here and get these pieces out, and that's a nice piece of meat for a crab cake. And just work your way through all of those leg sections. and get the meat out. And then, let's see, that's pretty good there. And normally when I'm picking, I'll set the claws aside. Sometimes I'll eat these later. Other times, depending on how much of the body meat I can get out, I'll come back and take out some of the claw meat and use that for the crab cakes as well. I don't like using only claw meat in a crab cake. I just don't like the consistency, but if you can keep some chunks of claw meat in the crab cake, it's real nice because it's sweeter meat, and it works out good. So let's see here. I got some more meat in here I can get out. And there's a good chunk. And I found out years ago it's really helpful to wear rubber gloves or food service gloves if you have them, just because it's kind of easy to get cut when you're picking crabs, and you're talking about something that's been seasoned with a lot of salt and Old Bay, and that hurts when it gets into a cut. And so gloves are good, but so basically there's the amount of meat I can get out of half of a crab body. And you know, you can get an idea, you know, if I go to maybe 2 or 3 crabs, that's going to be enough for one crab cake. And I've got 25 crabs here, so I should be able to get 8 to 10 crab cakes out of this pretty easily. So that's the procedure. Again, if you clean the crabs ahead of time, you save a whole lot of mess and a whole heap of trouble when it comes time to do the picking, and you can just sit here indoors at a kitchen table and do it and not worry about making a mess. So that's it for today. Once I get all these picked, I'll put the meat in the fridge, and tomorrow I'm gonna make some crab cakes, and we'll be having those for dinner tomorrow. Thanks for watching.